Good evening, everyone. This is the Planning Commission for the City of Columbus, and the date is 12/21/2022, and the time is 6:32. I'd also like to put on the record the temperature is like 2 below, and we have a snowstorm, so I appreciate everybody showing up tonight. First thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could stand, if possible. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The third item on the agenda tonight is the approval of the meeting agenda for tonight. Anybody like to make a motion?
This is Barb, so moved.
This is Bob, second.
We have a first and a second. Any questions? Any discussion? Let's take a vote. Frank, you want to start off?
Frank, aye.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
We'll go to item number 4, motion. Approval of December 7th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
This is Chris. I'll make the motion to approve.
This is Barb, I'll second.
We have a motion. It's seconded. Anybody have any questions, any discussions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. We'll start on Bob's side this time.
Bob, aye.
Barb, aye.
Ron, aye.
Chris, aye.
Frank, aye.
Thank you. We'll go on to item number 5. Motion, approval of December 7th, 2022 Bonfire Farmstead preliminary plat and Blaine Brothers Truck Line CUP and PUD public hearing minutes. Anybody like to make a motion?
This is Bob, so moved.
This is Barb, I'll second it.
We have a motion on the floor, it's seconded. Any questions? None. We'll start with Frank.
Frank, aye.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
Thank you. We'll go on to item number 6, motion approval of December 7th, 2022, 2023 fee schedule public hearing minutes.
This is Barb, so moved.
This is Bob, I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll start with Frank.
Frank, aye.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
Motion's passed. We're on to item number 7 on the agenda tonight. It's discussion and motion. Bonfire Farmstead preliminary plat, pages 1 through 52. And it says, please bring enclosures A from your December 7th public hearing. Before we start on this, Elizabeth, can we tie in 7 and 8 together?
Mr. Chairman, yes, you can combine 7 and 8 together.
It's funny, I couldn't hear you there. Did you say yes?
Couldn't hear me? Yes, you can, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The
So we're going to,
microphone's not working. Can you hear us? Okay.
it's always that screen there, I think it blocks you off. But anyway, we're going to tie items number 7 and 8 together, even though we'll have 2 different motions on each item. Correct, Elizabeth?
Yes, you have 2 motions on this item.
Okay. Well, we had the discussion, well, this is the second part of our December 7th public hearing, and now we're down to the discussion amongst the Planning Commission members on the Bonfire Farmstead preliminary plat. Anybody like to start it off, or Elizabeth?
Mr. Chair, I don't know that there are very many changes from our public hearing as far as the preliminary plat goes. I do know that we had a brief discussion as to whether or not there would be dedication for a cul-de-sac. We've not received support for that, so I think at this point it will be proposed as presented, and I don't think there's any changes to the plat itself. And I will check with Frank and or Dean if there's anything I'm not aware of on the plat.
No. Is Frank on Zoom tonight?
Frank and Ella are on Zoom tonight.
Okay, I can't see that. I can see the screen's a little. Well, is there any discussion? We'll start with the preliminary plat. Anybody have any questions or
No.
issues you'd like to discuss?
This is Bob. I have nothing to discuss at this point.
Barb?
No.
No, that's Chris, I don't.
I'm
Frank?
cool with it.
I don't either. Well, I'll make a motion to recommend the approval of the Bonfire Farmstead preliminary plat following and agreeing with the report dated on December 15th, 2022, written by Dean Johnson of Resource Strategies Corporation with his findings of facts 1 through 14 and recommendations 1 through 10. I'd also like to add on there the Kevin Bittner's engineer memorandum dated December 2nd, 2022, and his findings of fact. Is there anything we've got to add to this?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair, that covered it all.
Anybody like to second that?
I'll second it, Frank.
Can we have a motion on the floor? Any discussion?
No.
No comments, no questions? We'll take a vote then. Frank?
Frank, yes, aye, whatever.
Chris,
I'm
aye.
good with it.
Ron, aye?
Barb, nay.
Bob, aye.
Okay, the motion passes, and the recommendation will go on to the city council for December 28th, next Wednesday. We'll go on to the second part of this motion, which is not motion, but the next part on number 8 about Blaine Brothers discussion. Blaine Brothers Truck Alliance, CUP and PUD, pages 1 through 52. Please bring enclosures A and B from December 7th public hearing. Anybody have any issues or discussion on this part we're going to talk about?
This is Chris. We did receive the drawings from them with the landscape changes. And I am really happy with the changes you made and the additions. I think the only thing is I still think there could be a little more screening where the grasses are, would be my opinion. I did look up that type of grass, and from what I found, they only get to be about 2 feet. So I still would like a little more screening there, but I would like to commend Blaine Brothers for the job coming back with your screening and your landscaping, because I think the bulk of it looks really nice. And I like the sign you added with your name. I think that dresses it up a lot. There's only the one area that I'm a little concerned about. So I would like to see a little more screening in that part. I know we had a fence as part of our packet. And Dean, I think you said you brought up the fence with them?
I received that through the city council, and we made them aware of the fence that was going to be presented to the planning commission, yes.
Okay, and I know there was some talk from the council that, you know, maybe doing conifers with the fence and that, but I think we're getting closer. And I know I sounded the last time maybe like I wasn't in favor of this business, and that is definitely not the case. I think your business is a good business. I think you're going to bring jobs here. I totally love their training program, and they're wanting to bring kids in and teach them a trade without having to pay for college and everything else. I think that's super. But I'd like to see just a little more screening on Hornsby.
This is Bob. I agree with Commissioner King about the screening, and I do applaud you for the workability on your landscaping plan. I think that addressed a lot of the concerns I had. We talked last meeting about crime in the area, and then we talked about maybe too much landscaping would hinder or enhance the ability for additional crime. Well, that's a crime problem. That's not something that should be leaked into our design protocols. And so I like what you've done, and I agree totally with Commissioner King on the screening aspect of it.
Frank, you got anything to add?
Nope. I like the whole project.
You do? Barb?
No, I am opposed to it. I'm sorry. I just,
That's okay. My 2 cents on it, I like the improvements they made on it. Maybe 6 or 7 more trees would help on Hornsby, but I don't know about that big fence. I don't know, that's a big project. Put that up, it's nice if it was there, but I don't know if it's that necessary. But I don't know, how do we deal with that if we just ask for a few more trees here, Dean?
Just ask for a few more trees.
But that, I think other than that, the whole project, I think is great. It'd be a great advancement for that area, and I think it'd be great for our city. It's just maybe a few, but boy, it really looks sharp on paper. Till it's there, I guess it's another story. So maybe that can we talk to anybody from them? Or
Mr. Chair, you can invite them to the table.
would anybody like to, Dean, would you like to come up? Or just give your opinion, if a few more trees would help, or?
Name and everything again, or?
No, well, I don't.
Just for Ella, who's trying to take the minutes, so she's on Zoom.
Dean Daly from Blaine Brothers Truckline. Address?
Yeah, go. No, you don't have to put an address. We got your name.
Okay. We could certainly consider a few more trees along that Hornsby side. I don't think that'd be an issue. I thought that what was drawn looked very nice. It's not cluttered. It's, there's still a bit of sight line into, but it, again, at speed going down the roadway, I feel that you'll see the trees. You won't, unless you're truly looking in, you won't see. But whatever is acceptable to you guys, we would be willing to definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
It,
you.
it really, it's, looks nice otherwise. I mean, and thank you very much. And I know you put the wall back there and it looks nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Is this something that can be worked out with the city then, Dean?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, in the council or whatever? Okay. Any other questions anybody have for Dean?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yeah.
just for clarification, we have another revised drawing that was included in your packet. And that is a site plan illustration of a revision to the easterly entrance on proposed 150th Street. Or is it Avenue? I can't even remember, street or avenue. Anyway, 150th. The previous drawing, and Dean had actually questioned one of my findings of fact that regarded the original entrance and the security gate that you had seen in those original plans, that they were changing from a sliding gate that met in the middle of the driveway to swinging gates, and they would not be putting any kind of wall up like you have on the easterly sides of the buildings, where those are remaining to be sliding gates. And so I just want to call your attention that in my findings, if I can find this, number 17, the second sentence now reads, the easterly access includes two sectional 80 long feet gate. I'm going to change that. I'd like your consideration to change that to reflect this drawing, and it would read, the easterly access includes two swinging security gates located on both sides of a center median. I don't believe there was a median in the previous drawing either, but that is that's a formal request on their behalf to acknowledge that change in the site plan. Regarding the landscaping itself, if in a motion You acknowledge receipt of the screening plan that was dated December 15th, but you'd like consideration of swapping some better screening for some of the grasses. I think that would capture the intent of that discussion, and that can be discussed at further length at the council meeting, or it certainly can be done in a staff effort. Aside from that, I don't know that I would suggest, other than in the recommendations number 8, that's page 6 out of 7 of my memo. You had already noticed perhaps revised landscaping and screening plans received December 15th. I want to insert and revised east entrance gating plan received 12/20. So in an approved conditional use permit, ultimately, these become attached to the property record itself. And so it's important that we make sure all of the exhibits we're referencing that we've approved, we want to have the latest and greatest. And that doesn't mean after this leaves your meeting that city council can't adjust or change these as well, or if there's something else left out that came in for a revision. You may notice the very last phrase in that section 8 reads, except as may be modified with city approval. There are a lot of things that do happen from the time you review these documents at public hearings, and then when they go to full drawings for construction purposes, things change. Those need to get modified, and the city needs to approve those. That's the point. So I think with those two changes, it would make my findings of fact and recommendations consistent with what you may be thinking of doing.
Dean, this is Bob. Does that also include the additional landscaping that you're going to work with the developer on?
Yeah, don't ask me how I worded that, but I did put some wording in there in your motion that you would like to see some changes with some of the grasses to more coverage type materials. I don't think any of us want to get in the design business.
No.
I think the plan was done very well. I saw an earlier rendering that was completed on this, and it actually showed all the mature trees in mature state, and it was a little deceiving. And if I would say anything about my reaction when I first saw this, you know, why would they submit it when it's really the plant materials at planting? That's what you're seeing. The pine trees aren't more than 6 feet tall. The deciduous trees are small, and the grasses that you saw are plant stock, not mature height. So they were, I think they were being very legitimate in the portrayal of what you would see. And as a planned unit development, the trade-off that you're entitled to do for concessions that are written here as part of the recommendations, it's entirely your option to argue, at least to the city council, for their decision to see a change in any of these things. And it seems to me we're down to the screening document itself, and that's great.
Thank you, Dean. Any other discussions here, topics? Paint? Want to talk about paint, or?
Oh,
That wasn't.
what about it? No,
Well,
I don't think Dean wants to go there.
okay. Well, anyway, back, there's two Deans here, Dean, so we got, whatever. I don't, so back to you, Dean Johnson.
Yes.
So you rattled off there about 7 and 8 and stuff. If we did make a motion, I'd have to put that in the motion too?
You may do it if you accept the changes that I made, and if we have someone that's officially making changes for the record, that's great. Otherwise, I've got a red line document that I will leave for the record. In fact, my intention would be to redline these recommendations and give that to the city council for their meeting.
Hey, Ron, I think if we just say the findings of fact, number 17, amended as previously discussed with Dean Johnson, and then also recommendation number 8, as previously discussed with Dean Johnson, should suffice as long as Dean provides the actual language. To make your motion
Is
easier.
that under the recommendations, right?
Yeah, so fact of findings, number 17 on page 29,
Yeah,
and then recommendations, number 8 on page 31.
okay.
Those are the amended portions of his report.
Well, is there any other discussion on this? Frank?
Nope.
No,
Barb? Bob, anything?
Nothing to add?
Well, okay, I guess I'll make the motion. I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of the truck line plan unit development conditional use permit following and agreeing with the report dated December 15th, 2022, written by Dean Johnson of Resource Strategies Corporation with his findings of fact 1 through 38 and amending item number 17 and his recommendations 1 through 22, amending item number 8. I'd also like to add in there with the motion about the memorandum written by the city engineer, Kevin Bittner, on his memorandum written December 2nd, 2022, and his findings of fact. Did I miss anything on that, Dean?
we get the screening.
We're good?
We're good? Okay, I put a motion on the floor. Is there anybody like to second it?
This is Bob, I'll second.
We got a second. Any discussion? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. We'll start with Frank.
Frank, yes.
Chris, aye.
Ron, aye.
Barb, nay.
Bob, aye.
Well, the motion is passed. It will be recommended to the city council on December 28th, next week. If you want to join the council, we'll send it up to them. Maybe there won't be a snowstorm, Dean. Who knows? Thank you very much.
I'm hoping for another snowstorm. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks for
Thank
all
you.
your input.
Merry Christmas.
You can give us about 3 or 4 minutes to clean up all these papers. We'll get on to the second item tonight. Okay, we're going to go on to item number 9 on the agenda tonight, and it's a public hearing and discussion. Ordinance 22-11, City Code Amendment to Chapter 7A and Zoning Map Amendment, CI District, pages 53 through 71, and handout on Wednesday. I hope I read the right one, yeah. On Wednesday, addition pages A4 through A7 and enclosure E. So Ella, would you read the notice as published?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the City of Columbus Planning Commission on December 21st, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter, as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall, located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a city code amendment revising or establishing use definitions, creating a CI light district, including outdoor storage performance standards, amending the conditional uses within the existing CI district, adding specific performance standards for contractor yard limited, and allowing for expansion of non-conforming uses by conditional use permit and planned unit development application, thereby amending Chapter 7A of the City Code, The Columbus Planning Commission shall further consider a zoning map amendment rezoning the western portion of the existing CI district to the proposed CI Light District. A full copy of the proposed ordinance is available for review during regular business hours in the city administrator's office at the address listed above or viewed on the city website. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or who want more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received. Signed, Elizabeth Mersco, Zoning Administrator. Submitted to Forest Lake Times on December 5th, 2022. Published and posted in the Forest Lake Times on December 8th of 2022.
Thank you, Ella. Well, we're looking at several changes in the ordinance to Chapter 7A and the zoning map in the CI district on Lake Drive. And since Megan, since you led us through this since June, you want to kind of go through it here?
Absolutely. So this evening, we'll provide a summary of the process that we've utilized and also talk about sort of how we got here and some of the policy decisions that have been made thus far, and then create an opportunity for that public hearing. So if we could have the next slide, please, Elizabeth. So the city adopted a moratorium within the commercial and industrial district this June. It implied a moratorium on certain types of development, most specifically contractor shops, building and trade offices, recreational vehicle sales and service, light industrial, appliance and vehicle service and repair, lumber yards and sales, and machine and welding shop facilities. A moratorium is often referred to also as an interim ordinance, and so an interim ordinance provides an opportunity for a city to examine its zoning code without the pressure of additional applications. And so as part of an interim ordinance, the city undertakes a planning study, and that's the work that this commission has done alongside the city council for the last several months. We can move to the next slide. And again, these are the specific targeted uses that we called out as part of the interim ordinance and the moratorium that was adopted by the City Council. Not all uses within the CI district were considered problematic. It was these particular uses that the city required additional review of. And so I thought it was helpful to talk about the phases of this planning study and the work that has been done by this commission and the City Council and your staff. We adopted a three-phased approach in terms of looking at the policy decisions behind this ordinance. In particular, we talked about what the district is today and what this commission believes this district should look like in the future. With those thoughts in mind, we moved forward by adopting particularized definitions of uses so that it was very clear to applicants what types of uses were not only allowed, but what those were defined as. And then finally, we moved on and talked about now knowing what uses would be permitted and conditional within the district, what were the performance standards that would be appropriate for specific uses, and in particular, whether or not there were additional standards that should be utilized for specific uses that would be conditional within the district. And so within your zoning ordinance, you have your conditional uses listed, but now we also have a specific performance standards related to contractor yards, and that's similar to what you've done with asphalt planning and processing as well. So it's a similar process that you utilized for other uses within your ordinance. Then the Planning Commission reviewed the draft language and presented that through a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Council, had conversation and some revisions of the ordinance came out of that meeting. The City Council completed a secondary review of the ordinance and ordered the public hearing that we are attending this evening. Within your packet, you will see that there were further revisions to the ordinance provided by the City Council at that City Council meeting, and we will go through those ordinance revisions at this time. We are now in this phase 7 of our review in our public hearing process. And in this process, throughout the course of this conversation, you have always considered public comment. There have been good participation from the public in these meetings, and good discussion and written submission, both in-person testimony and written submission from business owners and from residents talking about what's important to them for the future of the district. So now we have gone through we are here this evening at our public hearing for adoption of an ordinance. And again, we've gone through the sort of phases of this process, but it also, I think, is important to note sort of what the public engagement has been here. You have taken an extraordinary amount of time to thoughtfully consider this ordinance, to take the public feedback, and to have those conversations. So one of the initial points that we started with and that this commission it was important to this commission to consider was that revisions to the ordinance be consistent with your comprehensive plan, and that we not undertake a new zoning overlay that would somehow require a comprehensive plan amendment, what the comprehensive plan designed for this district is in fact appropriate for the use. And so the comprehensive plan indicates that your Lake Drive corridor here historically has allowed a mix of commercial industrial uses. It is not a residential district, but that it is appropriate and should continue to be utilized for that commercial and industrial purpose. Keeping in mind, however, that these properties must be served with with private sewer and water systems. And so that the types of uses that are permitted within this district are naturally limited to some extent based upon the accessibility or the inaccessibility, I should say, of public sewer and water. All right, moving on to our next slide. So in the course of your conversations about the appropriateness of uses, the appropriateness of what is there today, the future traffic patterns of Lake Drive, the impacts of increased industrial development within this important corridor within the city, a bifurcated process was adopted. And that bifurcated process reflects a new commercial industrial light district that significantly reduces the more intense uses that are allowed within the existing CI district. And the public purpose for doing so and the policy reasons behind that are specifically related to the impacts on surrounding residential uses. And again, we've talked about this map extensively over the course of the last several months, but it's important to note that while both sides of the CI district are in fact surrounded by rural residential uses, it is the west side of the district that has active and ongoing residential uses. The east side is primarily impacted by shoreland and wetlands, rendering those areas of the east side that are rural residential practically not developable for residential uses. And as a note on our commercial and industrial light district, so again, it restricts and limits the uses on the west side of Lake Drive. And it also very specifically adopts increased screening requirements, storage standards, and performance standards. Outdoor storage, unlike on the east side of Lake Drive, must have a direct relationship to the primary use of the site. They cannot be separated. It must be located in a side or a rear yard. No outdoor storage can occupy any required driveway or maneuvering area. And except as approved by a conditional use permit, outdoor storage may not exceed 30% of the site, excluding retail products sold outdoors and fleet vehicles. And so your existing CI district does not allow significant piles, aggregate crushing piles, but this substantially and entirely, frankly, eliminates much of that storage while allowing uses such as a landscaping shop to have mulch piles and things along that side of the new West District. Furthermore, substantial outdoor screening standards have been applied to this CI Light District. And you'll see that they're very similar to some of your districts that have that are also adjacent to residential uses within the city. So this is consistent with some of the interpretations that you've made in the past. Number one, all rescreening effectively must limit any public view of that outdoor storage area if approved by conditional use permit. It must be 95% opaque throughout the year. It can be satisfied by a number of mechanisms, which are listed here, and that would be up to the applicant to, determine whether or not which was the correct fit for their property. The rescreening may be reduced by the city council if an applicant can demonstrate that the public view from an adjacent residential property is limited due to wetlands or other permanent natural features. I think it's important to note that that is discretionary on the city council's part, and it is not an automatic, allowance for screening, no requirement for screening if wetlands are present. We're also allowing a stronger building standard. So part of the conversation that we had when we were visioning what would be a good fit for this district is more buildings and frankly more structures. And so with that in mind, we have incorporated allowing construction of lean-to or accessory structures for screening, again, to create that separation between the residential and commercial districts. All of the screening plan is part of your land use process and must be shown and fully detailed, much like the conversation you just had about screening a new Blaine Brothers site. And then lastly, the property owner remains responsible for restoration of that process. So as the landscaping matures, if trees die, if something changes, the property owner remains responsible to replant and ensure that that screening is maintained. Then moving on to our next slide. So those are that's the sum of the CI District Light revisions and proposal for what is very clearly a new district within your zoning ordinance. The existing CI district would remain applicable to your east side. Upon council review, a number of changes were recommended to this body. Number one, eliminate future high-intensity uses with heavy manufacturing or the development of contractor shops with heavy machinery. So you may recall that we had two different types of contractor yards, a contractor yard light and a contractor yard heavy. The contractor yard heavy was removed from a permissible use within that CI district existing. However, any existing uses, any operations for a contractor yard that are in effect as of the date of this ordinance would be allowed to continue specifically and be expanded by CUP. Again, that's probably an important conversation to remember that we had along the way as well. One of the things that we strove to do in the course of this was to not create nonconformities and to ensure that existing businesses would be allowed to expand without significant zoning restrictions aside from what already existed at the time their CUPs were approved. The draft ordinance does accommodate all existing businesses that are permitted at this point in time. Moving on, we also, a couple more items of summary. We eliminated the IUPs for entertainment venues and yard waste composting. Those were existing IUPs within the CI district. We removed those from the ordinance. And then in your packet, you will see a red strike through for the existing design standards. I wanted to clarify for you all that those design standards are in effect. They just remain unchanged. And so when we go to submit a revised ordinance to American Legal Publishing, which is our code processor, we want to show them those things that we changed in the ordinance, not those things that exist today. And so the existing standards for your CI district with regards to design are there, even though they do appear as a strike-through within your ordinance packet. And then lastly, there are a number of other proposed revisions. We've discussed one of them to some extent, which is the specific performance standards for contractor shops with accessory contractor yard limited. There's a spacing requirement that's now applied to those uses. Outdoor storage standards and screening requirements have been increased for those specific uses. And then, of course, a dust and a particulate management plan, which is similar to your specific asphalt performance standard, has been incorporated for this particular use. And then lastly, I think it's one of the sort of ancillary items that came up in this process was we have so many conditional uses that are operational within the city. And then when we revise the zoning ordinance, how are those properly expanded if they're not listed as a defined use within a new ordinance? And so for that reason, we've adopted an additional flexibility measure that allows the Planning Commission and then the City Council to allow nonconforming uses, existing nonconforming uses to expand through a conditional use permit and PUD process. This is an approach that has been adopted by cities that have a high intensity of conditional uses as within their zoning ordinances. And it's another flexibility mechanism that again goes to address some of those economic issues that we talked about with the creation of nonconforming uses. And so with that in mind, that is a summary of our many conversations over the course of the last several months, and I certainly stand ready to answer any questions from the Planning Commission.
Do you have any questions, Bob?
I have none.
I have none.
Can we talk about the 10-foot setbacks again? Clarify that.
Yes, absolutely. So over the course of, so the existing, you'll see that there is a chart within your ordinance packet that lays out the existing CI district setbacks. The existing setbacks are broader for what would now be the CI East district. We reduced the setbacks for the CI West district to achieve essentially a balance between adopting a more restrictive use category. So, if you know along the distinction between the CI light and the CI existing district, we have significantly removed those uses, in particular, all of those uses that were called out throughout the course of the CI district moratorium. And so we have removed the more intense uses, including contractor shops and lumber yards and all heavy manufacturing. Those are the uses that we traditionally think of having significant impacts on surrounding residential. And so, but those are very economically viable uses within the city of Columbus and with the surrounding area for the city in particular because of its proximity both to 35W and 35E and as Lake Drive as a main connecting trucking corridor between those two significant thoroughfares through the Twin Cities. And so as an attempt to essentially strike a balance between removal of the economically viable uses within that CI West district, we increased the amount of land that could be utilized for future development within that district, while also applying significant performance standards and significant landscaping and screening requirements to mitigate any potential impacts to residential uses.
This is Barb. On the CI district, the rear yard setback is 10 feet. Is that an error?
That's not an error. If you may recall, a number of meetings ago, I showed you a very poorly drawn diagram, and it was two rectangles sitting on top of one another. So the blue rectangle was, and I can do it here on my paper. So if we consider this a parcel to be developed, your existing CI district allows this much developable land here and has setbacks in place for those more intense uses like heavy manufacturing, like trailer manufacturing and repair, like contractor shops with digging and piles and those things. The purpose of the CI Light District is to reduce the intensity of the approved use, of what's actually happening on the entirety of this parcel. And so because we reduce the intensity of what happens and because, frankly, we're requiring most uses to occur within a building as compared to outside of a building, we allowed the developable space to be increased so that because these types of uses were no longer allowed, there would be more land to be utilized within an existing parcel for a less intense use. And so it's an attempt, frankly, to strike a balance between what was there and what was permitted as of the date of the moratorium and what could be permitted in the future based upon your restrictive uses within the light district. This,
And
of
I know
course,
it-
is
it-
a policy question for you
It
all to
really is a
answer.
policy. I mean, I know you
Absolutely.
had brought it up back in those meetings, and I think the more, I know I've thought about it too, is, and another property comes in, the guy building the pole barn, keeps coming to mind where he wanted to reduce. I think where I start to have some concerns maybe that we should look at this more is a building could be built 10 feet from that property line. It's not just the use and everything. So when you're up against a residence, you could have a taller structure 10 feet from that property line. And is that what we want next to the residential areas? I think really is a question. And I know what you were getting at with giving more land use there because of the change in what the usage was. And I get that, but I've thought more about it, and I don't know if I was a resident there, if I'd want something 10 feet from my property line that close. That's my opinion.
Well, this has happened in other cities too, like in St. Paul, the Highland area, where people are building. They're just small bungalow-type homes in Highland, and then people come in and buy the land and demolish the little home and build a great big home, which affects every resident, how much sunlight they get and what they're looking at. I mean, 10 feet is, in my opinion, too short.
And I know, this is Chris again, I know, Megan, you had brought this up, and we kind of went through our meeting, we went through a joint meeting, it went through the council meeting, so it's gone through multiple meetings, but I think we've all had kind of we're relooking at this, is this the best up against the residents? And I think that's kind of the question.
I've got Ron here. The same issue is the residents a lot of the residents we're talking about are to the west. Am I correct? And if we're talking to the west, is there a big easement back there for Zodiac?
To extend it?
There is a road easement that is extended to the north. There's also a pipeline easement to the north, but there's also a wetland there. So there's some competing things kind of going on in that area.
And we also have utilities running back there, right, along that? I remember, I thought when, we could maybe get it in the public hearing or whatever, but I thought there was utilities to separate a little of it. But I kind of agree with Barb and Chris that 10 feet sounds, I mean, I don't know where the line is, because there's wetlands back
Right.
there, and a lot of it and stuff, but where does the 10 feet start? And if it's a business to a business backed up to each other, I see
No
no
problem.
problem. But when it gets to that residential area, looking at a buffer, and I think 25 feet
Yep, going north.
means a lot more.
Yeah, and this is Chris again. I think your point about what's the easement from Zodiac, what's the buffer from the wetland, and what's the distance that the pipeline easement takes up, and maybe we should ask that question before to get those distances, because it's hard to say 10 feet is adequate or not adequate if you got 100 feet or 200 feet already built into that buffer. So I think we do need a little more information there to really decide that. But I do agree, looking at the 10 feet, I just, as it stands, I don't think I'd be happy with that.
You were talking about the one on Bender Street, that pole barn?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, once I think about it, it's like that would be, and I know we want to achieve a balance here between the commercial property rights and owners and letting them utilize their property for their biggest bang for their buck. I mean, we got that. And then we got the residents. And part of this whole moratorium was based on the harmonious livability between the two different areas. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. And balance it for both property owners of the commercial and the residents.
Yeah, this is Bob, and when I look at the flexibility allowed through the change in the ordinance for setbacks, 10 feet, I agree with it in general principle. And I think it's a great idea to allow that flexibility for future expansion. I was also in the research I did, and I don't have specific numbers as well, which is why I brought up the question before about the utility easement, the road easement off of Kodiak, and then also what the wetland impact would be, what kind of a setback was allowed for that, plus the pipeline. I was assuming that 10 feet didn't butt up to that street on Kodiak. And so those are questions that need to be addressed. But otherwise, with the changes proposed and the flexibility with the setbacks, I'm all for that. And I think 10 feet between businesses
Yeah.
from the property line is okay, because that's 20
Right.
feet overall. And so, and I think that's normal. And so I think it just allows more flexibility for the impact of building on the west side of Lake Drive.
I wonder how many properties over there really actually would butt up to a business I mean, the only one I can see,
Well, like Street Smart. you
Right.
know,
Any way they
yeah,
subdivide
any
that.
way they subdivide it, it's
Yep.
going to be,
well,
It's
down
going
the
to-
street, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that goes east, north, and
Right,
south.
anything that would go,
But anything that goes on the west end of that cul-de-sac down there,
correct.
that will be butting up against residential.
So, and I agree that there is a difference between commercial business to commercial business and business to residents, that two different setbacks, possibly.
Within your zoning ordinance, you do have those distinctions drawn in other areas, and so that's certainly a recommendation that you can make for staff.
Yeah, I like that. And then as far as the distance with the easement and the utility easement and the buffer, that's really something I think we need a little more information. Or at least for the council to have.
right, right. Otherwise, I'm all for it.
All for what, the 10-foot?
10 foot, yep.
Well, any more discussion on this, or?
Well, Megan, I just do, this is Chris again, have one question. I know on my page 65, it has the CI light defined, district defined. Why is just the CI district defined taken out?
So the CI district,
Because it exists?
it exists.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. And
Okay.
so this is an entire red line of your
Yep,
ordinance.
and you
but-
just explained the
but-
existing
but
that
that's
didn't
the-
change.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay. Perfect.
And Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, I believe staff is working to answer those questions for you with regards to the easement, to the pipeline, and to the roadway. And, you know, we certainly can come back to that conversation if that would be helpful later in the meeting.
Yes, it would, but we're like, I don't know, we want to get this thing kind of settled up tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
but we
assuming
could
it's
do
from the
public
center of the road.
hearing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you had a question regarding a specific?
Well, we started off in the beginning, asking about Zodiac.
This is Dean, if I may. On public streets in platted areas, we require 20 feet drainage and utility easements. Side yards and rear yards on all property are 10 feet. I'm not aware that the property on Zodiac was platted. I think that is something of record, so I don't think that's a good example. But the new street that was put in as a part of the Waldock plat would have a 20 feet setback, but when they gain access off of that, that's a front yard, that'll never be a rear yard. You have a major pipeline that is on the Waldock property. It's 50 feet in width that runs completely north and south. There was another east-west, but that didn't follow the road alignment, if I remember. So if you had a rear yard in the case of some of the Waldock property that is abutting rural residential, that won't be a 10 feet setback. That'll be 50 feet because they can't build in the pipeline easement.
That's what we were trying to
Yeah.
have
So
addressed.
you got a buffer of 50 feet there to begin with.
Well, yes, if property is abutting an existing street like Zodiac, you're not going to have a residence on the east side of it, except we do have two residential properties that were platted years ago that are on the east side of Zodiac. But that plat came about after Zodiac was built, and all of those easements aren't standard like we require now. So any new street, whether it's Blaine Brothers that we just talked about with a new street in, or Hornsby Street, an existing street, when that property gets platted, the land adjacent to public roadways becomes 20 feet. All other property lines are 10 feet. Does that clarify it a little bit for you?
It does, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anytime when you have a large easement, like a private gas line or any kind of pipeline or a railroad, that's a different easement situation. They're precluded by that easement agreement from building in it.
Yep.
So in the case of the Waldocks property, they're already 50 feet set back from the north-south dimension that is
That's
the
right.
border of the rural residential.
That was my understanding, and that's how I interpreted it all, but you just confirmed it, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Well, we're not in our discussion yet. Any other questions of Megan? Well, hearing none, Will, it's time to open up the public hearing. Before I open it up, those letters, Elizabeth, are they already put in, that one letter put into the,
Yes, the letter is in your additions.
it's okay, but that's already in the open hearing?
It's in the record, yes.
Okay. So we're going to open up the public hearing. So anyone who has any interest in this matter and wants to present testimony as evidence on these changes, please acknowledge themselves by stating their name and their address. And we'll first start with anybody within the building here before we get to Zoom.
Good evening. My name's John Waldeck again. I'm on 6755 Pine Street, and we have the Waldeck addition. In Planning Commission, I want to go on the record to make sure that everyone understands that my brother Don Waldeck and I met with the city multiple times in the last few years to discuss the development of the Waldeck property, the industrial park on the west side. In all of these meetings, we were highly encouraged to put in a new road and develop the park because the city had no land and industrial users to buy. The demand in that area was very strong. We hired Newmark Marketing to market the parcels immediately. They had all of them under contract and sold. My brother and I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars putting in new roads to develop that park. Because of the moratorium, the city's unfriendly stance on contractors in Columbus, all of these deals fell apart except Street Smart that was approved. I understand a lot of work was put into this and done in this revising of the zone codes, but I'm asking that the Planning Commission revise the portion, the new code that allows 30% outside storage ratio increase to 50% outside storage. The 30% coverage ratio will make it difficult for businesses to accomplish their goals in the city of Columbus. the coverage ratio stays at 30%, the land will have less value. All the uses require a special use permit, so future buyers will be coming before the Planning Commission and the City Council to be approved. We can all agree that the Street Smart deal is great new company and many new jobs in the community and a beautiful brand new building. They bought the 5 acres and developed it from us. If they had the same deal with the new proposed 30% coverages, they would have to buy 9 acres for the same use. They would not have come to Columbus. Once again, I'm asking to please increase that outdoor storage from 30% to 50% ratio, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
I'm Dan Friedner, commercial real estate broker with Newmark. My clients and I are strongly opposed to the spacing requirement that was added to the new CI Light zoning code that says no contractor shop with accessory contractor yard limited shall be located less than a quarter mile from another contractor shop with accessory contractor yard limited. In the last joint meeting that I was here with the City Council and the Planning Commission, it came across to all of us that they really wanted it to be on the east side. The spacing that we talked about and got direction from the City Council was only going to be on the east side because, quote, they were trying to limit heavy contractors which are on the east side and their expansion thereof. So I don't believe the intention or any conversation during that meeting was about the west side and contractors. So the point is, if we sell 5 acres in the park to a contractor with a contractor yard limited, we can't put one across the street because it has to be a quarter mile away. So that's our point. So we're strongly against that. So if you want to do that on the east side, you know, that's something to consider, but on the west side, we're strongly against it. In addition to that, I agree with John. I'd really like you to increase the outdoor storage coverage ratio from 30% to 50%. If it stays at 30%, the land will be less valuable. Just like John just said, you have to buy 9 acres instead of 5. And people will skip over Columbus and go to Ham Lake, Forest Lake, Wyoming, because they have larger coverage ratios. Again, as you know, all the uses require a conditional use permit. So all the buyers have to come in front of you, which allow you to put conditions on their use. I hope you take that into consideration, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah.
Good evening, I'm Roger Nace, 6636 141st Street Avenue, Northeast. And first I want to say, you guys did a lot of work here. I read through your new rezoning and the CI light, and it was all the options you provided. I thought, boy, when you had to think through all of that, anyhow, there's a lot of good work that's been done there. So, I mean, we appreciate that, we really do. I think, you know, when I read through the document, the one thing that did jump out at us, or jump out at me, was the change in the setback. And at least initially, it didn't seem consistent with maybe the intent of the CI Light district to be maybe less intensive on the residential neighbors. You know, I believe it's 35 feet setback in the CI, and then that was changed to 10 in the CI Light, and Megan kind of explained at least the logic that was used there. But a couple things I'd like to say is that if there is another mitigating factor, let's say there's a wetlands there, or there's already another easement there that you can't get up close to, then you already meet that 35-foot setback to the property line, of the residential neighbors. So, they can butt right up against however close they can get to whether it's a pipeline or a wetland with whatever restrictions are in place there. And they're not worried about the 10 feet or the 35 feet because they're already meeting that setback because of just the way the land and the wetlands happen to lay out. And there's a lot of things that maybe we're looking at a small portion of what we're talking about, or at least what I was hearing with some discussion about a small portion of the CI Light, but it looked like the CI Light goes about 2 miles or so. And over that 2 miles, I'm certain there's places where you'd be looking where you have residential property and commercial industrial light property right next to each other. And in that case, I was envisioning if you had, a 10-foot setback, and I was sitting in my daughter's bedroom on the computer, and I'm going, well, shoot, this room is about 10 by 12. So if I'm standing on this wall, at the other wall, theoretically, there could be I believe a 50-foot tall building can be built in a CI Light district. And I could be misunderstanding that, but that's the way it looks. And that would seem like really high if you were at just 10 feet away. So I think those other mitigating factors are important and can be considered, but I think that you're not gaining anything with the 10-foot setback because you're already meeting that because you have these other features or zoning areas that you have to stay out of anyhow, like due to the pipeline. But there's other areas I know where our neighbor next to us, the horse farmer, his land butts up to the CI on Lake Drive there. And there would be a situation there where if they wanted to put up a big tall building in the back of their property, it would be right next to his property. So I guess consider the whole CI district when you're looking into that. And I do agree that it seems reasonable to allow that between the commercial buildings. I don't see any reason not to do that. It seems to make sense. But to leave the current setback between the CI Light and the residential. So I think that was really the only thing that I saw when I read through all of that seemed to kind of jump out at me. And so if you would, take that into consideration, we'd appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Steve Wagman, 13530 Zodiac Street. I would like to echo first what Roger just said. You guys did put a ton of work into this. It's obvious, and we all appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And I just had one question before I start of Dean, maybe. I'm wondering, you said that the setback would have to start past the pipeline, but you are aware the pipeline can be used. That would set the building back from the pipeline easement? Is that what you're saying? Most easements have restrictions for structure impediments, but we've got city streets and other things that cross these. Well, that's why I was going to ask, because I talked to the pipeline people, and they said that you could build a building on it, you could build a road on it. They don't care, as long as you're willing to move it when they gotta, if they ever have to go in and get the pipeline fixed, they gotta move it. But they can do whatever they want on it, pretty much,
until that point, and people do it. They said they build roads over them all the time. In fact, they'll put a road along it with it under the road. So I'm not sure about that. Maybe that has to be looked into a little bit more. And the other question that, it's more of a question or something for you guys to discuss. I am on the watershed board and quite aware that you can mitigate away wetlands easily. And all you got to do is buy wetland credits. I don't know if you guys have a way of memorializing it on the deeds, so it goes deed to deed to deed or whatever. That's what we do at the watershed. But they also dry up and change. So I don't, somehow they'd have to be, if they're used as a buffer, somehow they have to be made permanent. And I'm not sure how the city does that. I know how the watershed does it, but I would just like you to maybe take a look at that. And that's about all I have. I agree with Roger, 10 feet on a setback. I don't see any problem between the buildings, but the setback from the residential, I think, at 10 feet, the planner that I talked to, and I actually talked to a bunch of them, really had nothing positive to say about that idea. In all honesty, they said where she lived, it's 50 feet. Columbus is 35. Lino Lakes is 35. Forest Lake is 35. Hugo's 40. I would say Hugo's probably the closest rural to Columbus, and they have a 40-foot setback. 10 foot, I'm not sure about this easement thing, if it covers that whole area, but if there's a way that they can get 10 feet from our lot line and put a building, that just doesn't seem appealing to anybody. And I don't see how that is going towards your goal of trying to minimize the impact of commercial on the residential property. I think it's doing the opposite, actually. And I would like everybody to remember that when I moved in there, we were talking about history. When I moved in, 2/3 of that property was residential. The front third was commercial. We bought our property with that as residential. And the planner, Dean, at that time, recommended that they go to the section line with the commercial. And the council did not do that. They didn't follow Dean's recommendation. They went right to our lot line. And then we came in and talked to the city and negotiated and discussed with the planning commission and the council that they would give us a 5-acre buffer across the whole back. And then at the last city council meeting, where we were not allowed to speak, they pulled the buffer from in front of the last section. For whatever reason, I don't know. But we got a buffer, the neighbor got a buffer. My dad's property, they pulled it at the last council meeting. And so to go from his 5-acre buffer that the city told him he was to get to buildings 10 feet from his lot line just does not seem fair to me at all. And I don't see how it's it's not what the city was trying to accomplish, I think, when we started to do this, to minimize it. And I just would like you to look at that and look at the wetland issues and the easement issues on the pipelines, because there's a lot of issues with that stuff that that nobody's talking about here. And they all are important because that wetland can disappear, can be mitigated. I don't know about the pipeline easements or anything like that, but they should be looked into before you guys make your final decision. And other than that, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope that, or I appreciate the service from everybody, and the two that are leaving, thank you for your service. And everybody have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
The floor is open. Anybody else?
John, again, I just, like, Dean, on those easements, I mean, we've studied them pipeline easements. Believe me, you can put a road across it at a 90-degree angle, but you're not building down the center of it, and you're not putting any buildings on it. So, and you can't build on an easement of a pipeline. That's pretty major. And a lot of this of, you know, we don't want this, we don't want that, it's really opinions. And I was kind of going to say something like with Roger, I'll just say to that, you know, his life was going to change because we're going to park a skid steer and trailers in the field, and he doesn't want to look at that. But yet, you know, he's got a makeshift chicken coop, a wood pile with an old billboard tarp covering it, flapping in the wind. So maybe I should request the city to have him build the fence, so we don't have to look at that. I mean, it's kind of all in the eye of beholder, and I think one of the things we want to do is to get things specifically, so when they call, or somebody calls and, hey, my neighbor's doing this, what can I do? You know, a lot of that is just, you know, somebody's pissed off at their neighbor, and, well, I'm going to call the city and straighten this out. You know, there needs to be, you know, now that you're getting more stuff, the person answering the phone can tell them, give them an answer. In August, when I call up, because the flies are thick as bees, and I want the city to do something about the Wagman's horses, somebody on the phone should say, hey, buddy, you live in Columbus. Go to the hardware store, buy a can of Raid and a fly swatter. Don't call me back. I mean, you gotta, you know, we gotta put a little teeth in what we're doing. It's some of this gets emotional. Hey, I don't like his chicken coop. I don't care if he's got a chicken coop there. He can build it on the line, as far as I care. But it should go both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience like to get up, make a statement?
Good evening. John Williams, 5040 201st Place, Linwood. Property owner of 13528 Lake Drive. I would just ask that we look at that 30% and expand that to at least 50%, if not more. I'm looking at it as future of our property and what we're doing in there, and the council understands that we got to come in front of you guys. We got to talk about what we want to do, what we want to expand, what we want to change in there. That's going to require changing the CUP or adjusting that at that time. So as far as outdoor storage limits on the property, we already know that we're going to have buffers in there. We're going to have trees, fences, anything that's along that area. So to limit what we can use the property that we've paid millions of dollars for, I think is extremely unfair to the current property owners that are there. I'd also like to suggest a change in the method of how the city notifies. I just found out about this yesterday. I understand that it's in the paper and that's what it is, but to be honest with you, not everybody gets the Forest Lake Times. So I would request that if there's going to be something like this that's coming up and there's going to be conversation about it, why can't we notify the affected property owners through the U.S. mail so that we have some time to look at this, understand what's going on, and be part of the conversation instead of all of a sudden here it is and okay, I got to try to process this as quick and say what's my shortcomings going to be in this in the future.
Can I ask something of you? his CUP was in existence before all this, correct?
It was, and I was going to ask the same question. So Megan, in the ordinance, when we were allowing the expansion of existing businesses under the CUP, is it under new rules or the rules that the original CUP was established?
So if it's one of the specific uses, heavy machinery, trailers, or contractors' yards, then it's under the original rules as adopted. If it's an expansion of an existing CUP that's not specifically listed within the ordinance, then it will go to our broader catch-all expansion of the CUP process.
So if I'm going to understand that, if we move something or try to move a fence or try to change the yard in any way, and that requires us to get a CUP, that we follow the rules that were originally in place when we bought the property, and that will continue forward. Okay. Thank you.
And I would like to say, I like your building.
Thank you.
Which way, I'm lost here. Which building?
Blake Drilling.
Oh, yeah, it turned out really nice.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say all of this information is on the city website, more than it's ever been before. So if you go online, everything is on there, past, present, future.
Correct, but I just would like to have, I mean, to me, it just seems reasonable if there's going to be changes that are going on and to a property owner's property, that it wouldn't be that much to address it with a letter to the property owners and that thing. All of those people, I'm not sure that any of them know what's going on with any of it. And we don't sit on the city website and follow,
You don't have
what's
to
going
sit,
on.
but you can, it's all there.
Right, and I agree that it's all there,
And
but,
that's what people do now. Very few people use a newspaper or mail things anymore. They call it snail mail nowadays, so.
then, set up a thing that we can give our email addresses to the city, and you could email us a notice saying that there's proposed changes that are going
Yep,
on.
you can request it. It's there.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else inside the house here like to talk? Oh.
My wife, she wouldn't forgive me if I didn't stand up for a chicken coop. So I have to come up, and she's really proud of this thing, okay? And we worked a long time on it, and it's sided, and it's got windows in it and a nice roof on it. And what she's particularly proud of is we have a chicken run that comes out of the chicken coop into a run around the whole garden. So, or actually 3/4 of the garden. So the chickens come out in the morning on their own. They go and they feed on their bugs and stuff, and then they go back in and lay their eggs. But I just had to say something that, it's not too bad, and it's a long ways from the property line, but she'd feel bad and never forgive me if I didn't say something. So, all right.
Okay.
All right.
That's what's nice about living out here in the rural area. Especially the price of eggs right now.
Yep.
You got a gold mine there, if you didn't get all roosters. Anybody else like to make a comment, statement inside the building? If not, we're going to go to Zoom. Anybody on Zoom that'd like to make a statement about this issue? Well, hearing none, we're going to close the public hearing and get into discussion.
Question, Elizabeth, if Zodiac was to be extended, I mean, you already have these, you have a distance the road is. So there's no way you would ever butt up to a residential property if that was ever extended, correct? So the city has an easement to extend Zodiac north.
Yes, we do.
And what is the width of the easement?
66 feet.
So we have a 66-foot buffer to begin with, where from the,
It's 33 feet from the center of the road.
right, right. But you still have the 66 feet,
Yep.
the total width of the road between the properties, plus whatever.
Plus whatever, yes.
Yeah. And that isn't going to change, correct? I mean, be it wetlands change or the pipeline, the road easement is 66 feet.
So wetlands can be mitigated, but not
Right.
within the city.
But right,
Right.
and that's unless you give up the easement.
Until a road is established, my understanding is the property line is the property line. And
Okay.
until it's an approved road, you don't have setbacks.
Okay.
As far as the wetlands, they can be mitigated, but it's usually 3 to 1. So whatever portion you try to mitigate, you have to replace 3 times that amount. And it's very expensive to do that. Not to say that it can't be done, but it's usually very difficult to do.
But to go from 10 feet to 35 back there is,
Highly unlikely.
Yeah,
you what?
I agree.
Highly unlikely.
So,
As far as the pipeline is concerned, I can address that. Being a pipeline employee for 16 years with Williams Pipeline, their easement agreements are very stringent. They do not allow people to build upon their easement. You can build right up to their easement or to the space. It's usually 50 to 100 feet. In this case, there's no pipeline out there that allows you to build upon it. They fly the pipeline every 2 weeks to make sure there's no encumbrances or encroachments on their easements. That's federal policy that they do that. Some people try it and they get caught and they have to dismantle. So there's not going to be any building on that easement.
No, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. I know, I see the plane go over.
Every 2 weeks they have to fly it.
so Megan, can we go back to that, what is it? The quarter mile with the, I got to find it again. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep, it's part of the performance standard revision in
Yeah.
particular. And I will, please discuss and then.
I understand, we didn't want to, it would be on the east side, continue that type of heavy business. On the west side, why the quarter mile on those type of, where did that come?
Yeah, so I'll say that on the east side, the heavy use has been removed from the draft ordinance. And so that would no longer be a permitted use unless it's in operation at the time of adoption of this ordinance. I will turn to City Administrator Mersko to relay the conversation that occurred at the council meeting.
I wouldn't be able to recite the exact conversation from the council meeting, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it was supposed to be on I just want to make sure east and west. I don't know that they wanted to apply to the west side. I don't recall that conversation. I recall the conversation that it was going to apply to the east. And I know some council members are in the room. So I tend to agree. The quarter mile is, pretty large. A large distance for two like businesses, especially if it's the light business. So I'm not going to be able to recite the council discussion, but I agree with the person that testified. I think a quarter mile is a long distance for two like businesses in a light industrial district.
On that
And the
side.
on the light side. I understand the issue on the west side with a heavy industrial business. You want to separate them because you don't want to. You don't want any more like businesses.
And I thought that was the intent of it.
And if that's the intent, then I think that should be removed from the west side.
I would agree.
I agree.
I'd agree too.
And what page is that on, do you know?
Yeah, it would be on, what, I found it one time. 69. Thank you.
A.
Yes, A. Yeah, I agree, because and I could be wrong on what I remember. I remember wanting to limit it on the east
East
side.
side.
But I don't remember wanting, when I look at what contractor limited is, that was the whole intent of putting it on the west side, was to lighten that. But now we would be really taking away the ability to,
You're
Sure.
limiting the light business.
right, and you've already made it light.
Good point.
So, thank you. I'm glad, hopefully we clarified it, and that was the council's intent. The other item I do want to bring up, because I have thought about this quite a bit, and I believe Blake Drilling and Street Smart both have more than 30%. And I kind of look at the business that we just earlier approved, and I know it's not storage, it's parking, but you have a high percentage, again, of property being used for what they're doing business with, and that would be the semi-truck. So I think in this area, I agree, it should be increased from 30%. I mean, that's my opinion. And what is Street Smart? Do you know, Elizabeth, what their percentage is?
I don't know what their percentage is, but I know they used every percent they could for storage with the
Does anybody
setbacks.
remember what it was?
No. But they do use it.
Yes.
But isn't that typical? You put a business in and it kind of morphs a little.
And we're dealing with whatever is out there has to be screened, correct? I mean,
That's
we're
correct.
covering some of the other issues with the storage, with the screening and not stockpiling and things like that. But I still do believe that that area still needs to be able to do more business like that type. So,
I think if you do the trade-off, I think if you allow the 50%, then I think you put the 35-foot setback. And the reason why I say that is most of the complaints that we get is the storage is right up on the property line.
yep.
So if there is that little screening buffer and such, but you allow them to use the 50% to maximize, what they are able to do, understanding that there's the buffer between the residential district and there'll have to be the screening within the 35 feet.
That's kind of my thought, you guys.
So you want to change on page 68, B number 4 to 50%?
Why don't you put your microphone up there? Thank you. Yeah.
Page 68,
Yep.
B.
I would like to increase it.
Is 50% what you're looking at?
Sure.
And Elizabeth talked about keeping the 35%.
For the
which I thought
setback
was
then.
good.
The setback.
Yeah.
From the residential.
Right, when it is abutting a residential
Yep.
district.
Yeah, I'd go with that too. Any thoughts on that, Bob?
Yeah, to me, 50%, that's a big jump from 30%. And outdoor storage has always been kind of the crux of the issue on the west side, in my opinion. And I don't mind the 10-foot setback. So maybe there's a balance between 30 and 50% that we can come to that would give flexibility on both ends. 40%, for example. But I just think it's too big a jump, and I think that people are going to abuse it to begin with because there's no enforcement available to monitor it. So we can only go by the rules that we set in place, and if we go, that's a pretty big jump from 30 to 50%.
And they probably do 60%.
Or 70. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying you'd rather see it down lower and then
40%.
the setback.
I keep the setback at 10, but increase the storage outdoor from 30 to 40% instead of 50%.
You guys?
I don't know, I'd rather keep the 35% and go to 50, but
Well,
It's 30% original.
it's not 35%, that's 35-foot
yeah, I'm talking
setback.
about 35
Setback.
foot back. I'm sorry, whatever I said.
Oh,
but
yeah.
the 50.
To me, the impact on the west side, this is a nice balance to change that setback, and I agree with that totally. And I'm willing to compromise on the outdoor storage to keep that setback at 10 feet,
So you're saying 40.
40.
Sounds like an auction here.
Well, it is a balance. I mean, that's what we're here considering.
Yeah,
What
I
are the
understand
impacts
that.
and how do we balance it?
Right, and this is Chris again. I think you hear the residents, they want more setback, and you hear the businesses, they want a little more outdoor storage, and that's
Right.
really where do we meet with the city and with the residents and with the businesses? That really is what we're trying to achieve here.
That's my thoughts also. That,
Okay.
I mean, we heard it from a few witnesses there that they'd like to have more storage outside, and you hear it from the residents, they'd rather have the 35, and that's where I sit. And
I don't think the 35 is an impact in that regard. I think it's a moot point because it doesn't apply.
And this just applies to new businesses, correct?
and it applies just to the residential.
Yep.
Right.
Right, not, just, right, Megan, this doesn't, we still got the 10-foot on business to business.
Yeah, so as I have it, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, as I understand your direction, the proposal is to have a 10-foot setback for all commercial industrial properties, rear yard setback for commercial industrial properties, with a 35-foot setback for those rear yards adjacent to residential.
Frank?
No comment.
I know those seem to be the two issues that we hear coming from the audience, and I think we addressed them. But are we moving too quick, or should we still look at more things here?
I think we're good. I think we move forward.
You think we move forward?
Yep.
Barb?
Well, you haven't determined yet whether you want 30, 40, or 50. We have to decide that first.
And I think we can do that right now.
All right. Well, let's just take a little brief. We'll go down. Chris, you want 30?
I want 35 foot and 50% storage, outdoor storage.
I'll go along with that, too.
So you want the rear yard setback?
Up against the residential
against-
to 35 feet, yeah, like Elizabeth has kind of recommended with increasing the storage percentage.
So, I'm lost. So you're going to change the 10-foot setback
To 35.
to 35?
That butts up against a residential.
Oh, just residential?
Just residential,
Okay.
yes, just
So
residential.
then we'll need two categories in the rear setback?
Correct.
Okay. 10 and 35 at residential, correct?
Right. That's right, Megan?
That's correct. And if you look within the chart that's within your existing ordinance, there are a number of footnotes to that chart that specify when a 10-foot or a 35-foot or whatever the applicable setback would be if there's differences in the setback for the adjacent parcels.
Okay, that's good with me. As far as the outdoor storage, I'd go for 40. Because that's a 10% increase. 10% is a lot when you're talking about piles of whatever.
Well, and I'm still concerned, I mean, I'm curious what Blake Drilling was given and what Street Smart was given.
John, I don't think, you're not maximized on your storage outside. Because I don't think you're maximized on using all your property today, correct? Yeah, so it's hard to say what, you know what I mean, what percentages, because it's, their vision for the future was to expand and be
Right.
able to expand. So I think they bought property understanding that they would be able to expand their businesses there. So I understand his concern, because in their planning, that's what, you know, that's what they planned for.
And they have a big yard back there.
And they have a big yard. So, you know, hearing the testimony, I think with the storage is, if they're going to you know, if they're gonna buy more acreage, they're gonna put, the storage is gonna come with the use, right? And so if they need X amount of outdoor storage, they're just gonna buy a bigger lot. You know what I mean, to do that? So the image of the district, I think, will stay the same, because they'll just buy bigger lots to put more, you know, more storage. And yeah, it'll be further spread out, but I think you'll have the same ratio. Because the type of use that's gonna go there, it's either gonna fit or not fit. They're gonna buy the appropriate size lot for the storage they want. I realize, Barb, what you're saying. We did a proportionate amount in the Freeway District. We did 150%, 100%, and 50%, depending on what district it was, as far as intensity of storage. This district has storage, you know what I mean, out there, so I tend to think that they should be able to maximize the storage for the property they bought. They're putting it in the side and the rear yard. They're not putting it in the front yard. And to me, that's the limitations.
Right.
It's the location by which you put it. And that's what we've done before, but we've allowed them to maximize the property that they've purchased as long as they meet the conditions.
Well, here we sit. Is it snowing out there? Everybody get a shovel.
50%.
Uh,
Too much.
To move it forward, I'll allow 50%.
You allow 50?
Yeah,
50, you said?
yeah.
With the 35-foot setback on residential.
I say that with some concern, though, but,
Okay.
No,
For the
that's fine.
residential.
yeah.
And one clarification, Megan, for storage, does the ordinance specifically say side yard, rear yard?
I believe it did.
It does. It specifically
And
says.
is the front yard, for definition purposes, to the side of the building, or is that 30 feet? Because I just want to make sure, because I think we changed the front yard setback from 75 to 30.
The 35, yep.
To 35. So I think that's something that you want to take into consideration, because generally, you don't want storage in front of the building. So because we changed the front yard setback from 75 to 30, I think you want to make sure that storage location, you know, in the side and rear yard, that you put it in the appropriate place you want it, because you don't want to drive past and see storage and not the building.
So all outdoor storage must be located in the side or the rear yard, pursuant to the outdoor storage standards adopted for the CI Lake District.
Yes, and I just wanted to make sure that the planning commission understood that we're going to change the look right now, because Lake Drive, the setback has always been 75 feet. We changed it to 30, so that's going to be a different look. The buildings are going to be much closer to the road. So just like EcoFund and Viking Industrial, both of those are at 30 feet. But in that district, we don't allow storage. So, you know, I mean, the buildings were allowed. So I think that's where you might want to think of tweaking a little bit, because you no longer have a 75-foot setback, because that's where most buildings are. And then we allowed the storage to the side and to the rear, and most of them have put screening. So you have either a parking lot or you have landscaping in the front, and then you have the building, and most time the building is screening the storage.
thought when we were talking about storage, we were talking about like the shops on the side, when we put the side storage.
Yes, and I'm not sure which of you were on the planning commission when we looked at Mobile Mini. And when we looked at Mobile Mini, we said, okay, the storage, yes, you can do the side yard, but you have to, I want to say it's either 100 or 150 feet. You know what I mean, back, because looking at their site plan, you know, they didn't, you know what I mean, the planning commission at the time didn't want Conex boxes going, you know what I mean, all the way to the 75-foot setback. You know what I mean, especially when they were too high. So they actually limited, not the percentage, but they limited the placement of where they could put storage.
So right now, you have the new street going into the Waldock.
Yes.
You know, and you could be 35 feet back there, which is going to have a different look than 35 feet back off of Lake Drive.
Yes.
How many properties are we talking about on Lake Drive that could be as far up as Viking or Eco Fund?
Isn't the new setback, in, all of them are going to be, you changed it for every district.
Except for all on the west side. In the CI Light District, the setback would be 35, and the CI District will remain 75.
But your question, Ron, was how many properties are we talking about?
Are we
that would-
affecting it? I thought I looked, I thought you had a,
Well, you have the one sheet.
with all the addresses and.
Yeah, there is one. Here.
Oh, that's something to think
Village of
about.
Key.
I bring that up only because regardless, I like the buildings, but they're really close. Eco Fund and Viking, they're beautiful buildings, but they're awful close.
Right, and I mean, I look at Blake Drilling, I look at, what is it, MUE, any of those, they look nice at the distance they're back. You know, so off of Lake Drive, it's one thing, but if somebody is developing like Waldocks are and you come in, can it be a different look? Or do you standardize it?
Well, that's a question I have for Elizabeth too. This is Bob. Can that be a condition through the CUP to decide where the storage can be applied in certain situations?
Again, it would depend upon the use and the nature of the storage, but generally speaking, when we allow outdoor storage as currently drafted in the side or the rear yard, unless there's another sort of nuisance impact that would be demonstrated by the use, the applicant would be allowed to put their outdoor storage in those two designated locations.
Which means you'd have storage starting at 30 feet on the side yard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we just change the setback.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Bob.
how you doing?
We're getting more confused as we get going. I think we're right to a limit, but I'm just worried about that 35.
Yeah, no, I am too.
City Administrator Marsko, you mentioned the concern of the side yard storage. Would your concerns be mitigated by only allowing outdoor storage in the rear yard? Or because the lots for sort of adjacent parcels may abut new streets, does that not meet those issues?
So the reason for my voicing my concern was, my concern was not so much as a percentage. My concern more was with placement, because to me, that's more of an issue. Because if it's in the rear yard and they have 50% coverage and you can't see it, you know what I mean, and it's buffered, you know what I mean, to me, that's a good thing versus having someone at 30 feet, even if it's at 30%, and that's where they put all their storage, and then you go by and that's what you look at. So that's why I was saying to you, I mean, right now you've changed the way the parameters lay out today is there's not a limit on storage, but we do look at, it's 75 feet back, and then we ask them to screen it. So it's, your perspective when you're driving is that it's not, right next to the road, because 30 feet is not,
That's close.
that's not that big of a distance.
Well, where do we go from here?
What?
Where do we go from here?
That's what I wonder.
Well, I think we make the decision, do we want to keep it at 35 feet as far as a setback, or do we want to go back to the 75 feet? And then the placement of the storage is back further where it's kind of going.
And I don't know that, whether you have a setback for the building at 30, but the storage has to be 75. I mean, I think you need
There's
another
something else there.
parameter for the storage, because I think that's going to be the bigger issue, not so much the percentage, but where it's located on the lot.
So how do you come up with that?
Yeah. So what's
That's why we have planners.
Right, well, Dean, I'm not a planner.
Write it into the rules.
I'd ask a question for clarification, and I apologize to everybody because I was not a participant in the process, so it's more of a question. On the 35 feet, front yard setback, was there discussion about that being only on a city street and not Lake Drive? Or are you going to have predominantly 75 feet setback on one side and now you're going to have 35 on the other? You're all consciously talking about vision, aesthetics, and things of that magnitude. I see it entirely on the brand-new city street that the Waldocs put in, that you would reduce the setback. I get it. But on the county road and with the predominant setback on the east side, are you possibly talking about two standards, 30 feet on a local street and 75 feet on Lake Drive? To me, that's one of the bigger visual impacts that I see here. And what you encouraged with the Waldock development was to have that internal access, and that's where you start making the compromise, in my mind, on some of these standards. I hate to bring up another thing. I asked Elizabeth if this came up, but in your rural residential district, so we're talking about any resident that wants an accessory building, the minimum setback is 20 feet from rear or side, or the height of the building. And so I'm asking, is that not an option for you to at least look at 20 feet as your minimum, unless it abuts other properties? And as Megan said, you've got a series of footnotes. Already in the ordinance, it's footnote 8 that says it's 35 feet if it abuts whatever. And I think you could use that standard in both your side yard and rear yard dimensions in both districts and put that footnote in. And then you're having a 10 feet side or rear in either side of the highway if it's abutting other commercial property, but wherever it's abutting rural residential, you kick in the 35. It seems to me that's what all of the neighbors are talking about, and so within your existing system, you could do it. But I started getting hung up when Elizabeth talked about if we compromise on a front yard setback, don't we still want a certain setback for storage? It dawned on me a bigger aspect of this. Are you really talking about 35 feet front yard setbacks from the county road? Or are you going to maintain balance? And this 35 feet is for anybody else that comes along. There are a couple more bigger properties that could also have local street access and enjoy a lesser front yard setback. But the problem is, if everything now on the west side is developed from internal roadways, your side and rear yards are going to be exposed to Lake Drive. And I don't like to step in here at the last minute and offer my 2 cents, but I'm just trying to keep it in perspective.
I think that's a good point, Dean, and, you did kind of mess it up a little there.
I'm
Thank-
good at that.
Yeah,
Well, our
you are.
original-
Very good.
Except when Steve reminds me of something I said 15 years ago.
Well, our original discussion started out just talking about outdoor storage from 30 to 50%. And then it expanded from there. And so what are we trying to do? Are we trying to, I mean, what's our discussion? How much?
Well, I was just wondering, is this just possible just to say just what Dean says, that on Lake Drive, it stays 75, but when you get off on an Ontario road, like 150th, it goes to 35? Is that?
I'm raising the question. I'm not trying to direct.
No, I
say,
was
but
thinking about that.
It might allow you to take into account what Elizabeth was saying about, well, it's kind of nice on the east side. People have their septic systems, their landscaping, maybe some public parking that's in the front yard. Then you have the building and everything's behind it. When you start getting side streets, side yards, rear yards, front yards get all twisted. And that's where some of the standards from other communities, particularly urban communities, aren't really what we can use because it's very different how it is. But you started out for all the 30-some years I've been here, 75 feet, and most of the developments occurred on one side. Are you going to change that balance and offer this incentive for front yard only on local streets? It's just a question. I'm not in disagreement at
No,
all about.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think Lake Drive should stay 75 feet. The big other question is, and I notice this when I drive down and I look at Street Smart, you are seeing all their storage. And you're going to see that all the way, and as any of those streets would develop. And I don't know how you get away from that. I mean, you got screening things in place and that, but you're still going to see it because Lake Drive is now.
Perpendicular.
Yes, you got side streets coming in that are being developed.
Okay, having stirred everything up, the other point I was going to make, based upon the screening and design standards that you've added in here, as well as the change in many of the uses, regardless of where that storage is, it shouldn't be an issue. And that's our job when these plans come in. If you're screening them properly, it shouldn't matter. So on one of the Waldock properties that has its access, I mean, the county's not going to give their new lots access off of Lake Drive. And so automatically, Lake Drive becomes a side yard. And if that's where you're saying the screening has to go, then it's kittywampus or backwards from what you have that you're
In the front.
experiencing on the east side. But if your screening requirements pay no regard to which yard it sits in, you're screening it from residents, you're screening it from roadways, it shouldn't be an issue. And I think that was one of the points that Megan made early in the presentation, that you've gone to reduce some of the conflicts that might occur next to residential property. You've changed some of the screening and design standards, and the combination ought to make that work. So again, without sticking my nose in this, I just wanted to know if you were consciously offering a 35-foot setback all along Lake Drive, or if that's an internal setback.
Well, I liked your idea.
Yeah, I think the way it's written here, it was kind of a generic, that was the setback. But as we've gone through tonight, things are changing. And I do like his idea also. I think 35 feet on Lake Drive is too close. And again, with the
Especially-
screening and all that, yeah.
Do you have good discussion notes for the city council?
I sure do.
Okay.
So I'll sort of repeat back what I hear the conversation as being, that 75-foot setback from Lake Drive to maintain consistency between both east and west sides. Side or rear yard setbacks that abut residential should be 35 feet. That there should be a 35-foot front yard setback for local roadways, and that screening that all outdoor storage must be screened, fully screened from the public roadway and residential properties. And that the planning commission is interested in expanding the amount of outdoor storage that would be available to property owners within the west district, apologies, the light district.
And looking at removing the quarter mile.
And looking at removing
Yeah.
the quarter mile.
Yeah,
Based on all of that, I have no further comment.
no, I think that's good.
That's good?
Yeah.
So I'm going to repeat this back for the purpose of our conversation tonight. So you are directing staff to make revisions to the proposed ordinance that ensures that there remains a 75-yard setback, whether it is a front yard or a side yard setback along Lake Drive, that there is a 35-foot setback from residential properties abutting the commercial and industrial light district, that there is a 10-foot side yard or rear yard setback within all commercial districts, that there's a 35-foot setbacks for internal roadways, and that the restriction, the quarter mile designation be removed for the west side district.
And we got the percentage increase?
Yes, and the percentage of storage is increased to 50%.
Mr. Chairman, there is a question from Zoom, so I'll just read it to you. It says, will this apply to tractor and car sales and the placement of their product in inventory? So is that going to be considered storage? Is display going to be considered just storage?
No, very explicitly exempted from the outdoor storage definition are retail products sold outdoors. And I would consider that automobile
Tractors,
vehicles,
whatever.
tractors are retail products that are sold outdoors. There's also an exclusion for fleet vehicles. So whether they're parking or stored, there's an exception there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody agree?
I think we're on track here. The problem is making the motion.
All right, and we still have the public hearing open at this point in time. So I would request a motion to close the public hearing and then take action as you see fit.
I thought I closed the public.
Maybe I'm a
Didn't I
I
close?
thought you did, and you opened the discussion, but.
Apologies.
Could be wrong, maybe Ellen could.
You were probably out shoveling snow.
all right, exactly right. My head was filled with all the snow. Exactly right. All right, very well.
So what's the ordinance number? Is it 202211?
Yes.
All right. If I can start this.
And we'll help you.
I need a lot of help.
With Megan's help.
All right. I make the motion to recommend the adoptions of ordinance number 2022-11 and an ordinance amending city code revising or establishing use definitions, creating a CI light district, including outdoor storage performance standards, amending the conditional uses within the existing CI district, adding use-specific performance standards for contractor yards, and allowing for expansion of non-conforming uses by conditional use permit and plan unit development applications, thereby amending Chapter 7A of the City Code.
With the amendments recommended by the Planning Commission this evening.
Yeah, with the amendments recommended by the Planning Commission. Wow.
Good job.
Good job.
Who would like to second that one?
This is Chris, I'll second it.
So there's a motion on the floor and it is second. Does anyone have any questions, comments about this motion?
No.
Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Frank?
Aye, Frank.
Chris, I.
Ron, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we got a second motion then coming up, right? Am I right, Elizabeth?
Yes, yes, the second motion is needed for the zoning map.
And that, is that, what one number, is that 202212?
12.
That's odd, it comes right after 11. I'd like to recommend an adoption of ordinance number 2022-12, an ordinance directing staff to amend the city zoning map to rezone the described properties from commercial/industrial to commercial industrial-light. Anything else?
No, that stands.
Geez, I'm
That's
gonna have to do this for 11. Anybody want to second that one?
I'll second that, Barb.
So we have a motion on the floor, it's seconded. Anybody have any discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll start with Bob on the end.
Bye-bye.
Barb, aye.
Ron, aye?
Chris, I.
Frank, aye.
Wow. I hope everybody's happy out there. You may not really be happy, but
Not-
you might be half happy.
Not possible.
Not possible.
Can't make everybody happy.
No.
We try.
Well, we try. Oh, guess what? Item number 10. Public open forum. Anybody want to get up?
Oh, don't invite them.
Nope. The mayor?
Oh.
Oh, the mayor wants to get up.
Sorry about the outfit, kids. What I have to say is tonight is the last meeting for Chris King, Bob. You three are coming back, right? So anyway, as long as we have a quorum. But I want to tell you guys, thank you for all the years of hard work and time and research, site visits, meetings, because as we all saw tonight, this isn't easy, and it's been a lot of time, a year on this one alone. So from everybody who's not here to all of us who've been to most of these and watched all the work and time and thinking, thank you very much. And if you reconsider, you're welcome to keep your chair. You already got name tags. So, and if you don't, thank you anyway, and enjoy your free time. Every Wednesday night, you can tune in and watch us on Zoom. So, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mayor.
And have a Merry Christmas, and you can tune in next week and watch us on the 28th.
Tune in for another show, huh?
Thank you.
Anybody else like to get up, talk, sing a song, or?
Sing a song. Let's have a carol.
Item number 11 is the Planning Commissioner's reports. Bob, you have anything?
Nothing here.
Barb?
Nothing.
Right?
Nada.
Chris?
Well, it would be pretty sad for me to go out without saying something, right?
Thank you.
No, it's been great, working with all of you, so thank you.
Well, I have. I started to write something, and I have to say that Chris and Bob, it's going to be hard having you guys gone. It really is, because you guys really brought a lot. And
Yep.
Chris, I know, when you're off your medication, it's a little bad, but other than that, you do a great job.
Some days. Thank you.
And anyway, it's really going to be a sad time, but I'm sure we'll see you in the audience, whatever. Item number 12 on its information, Associate Planners Report.
Yeah, I have a few things. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. First thing is there will be a permanent time change for planning commission meetings starting January 4th. We're going to be moving to 6 p.m. Second thing is I would also like to say, Commissioner Behrens, Commissioner King, it's been great working with you. I really appreciate feedback we've gotten from you, and just everything. Bob, feel free to keep in touch. Chris, I look forward though to keep working with you on the park board. And yeah, my last point is happy holidays and have a good Festivus for the rest of us.
Thank
Get
you,
the
Frank.
poll ready.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Item number 13, attendance at the city council meeting next week. It'll be me. I'll be there. Item 14, recognition, Commissioner Behrens and Commissioner King. Do we have a big trophy or something? or-
Ron, I would like to say just a few words.
Okay, Bob.
It's been my distinct pleasure to serve with such a great, hardworking city staff. And you've put up with a lot of my early days where I didn't know anything related to it. But you brought me along and you helped me understand things from a whole different perspective, and I appreciate that. Fellow commissioners, it's been my honor to work with you, and I hope we made friends along the way, and look forward to seeing you down the road. Thank you very much for all your help and all your teaching and coaching. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to thank somebody else tonight before we go to adjournment. I'd like to thank the audience and the public. from
And Megan.
Columbus. I think you did a good job. Sometimes
Yeah.
we have difficult problems, and sometimes you got to sort through them and get to the end. And I hope, like I said, we don't make everybody happy, but we try to. And I hope we continue to try and resolve these issues when they come up. So you all have a Merry Christmas. Anybody want to make a motion for adjournment? How about-
Motion to adjourn.
You want to second it, Bob?
Bob, second.
No. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Frank?
Aye.
You stay. Chris, aye.
Bob?
Bob, aye.
Barb, aye.
And Ron, aye. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.